This video addresses U.S. Department of Transportation rail tank car specifications, some tank car features, and distinguishing characteristics first responders can look for to determine the type of rail tank car. We will demonstrate a virtual walkaround of the DOT117, which is considered a general service non-pressure tank car that may be used for hazardous and non-hazardous commodities. All shippers must ensure rail tank cars with loads or residues of hazardous materials are in good condition prior to offering them to the railroad for transportation. One of the challenges first responders may face in the field is graffiti. It's an unfortunate reality, but graffiti may partially obscure critical markings and information that could hinder identification. For this reason, it's even more important to be familiar with the information that should be on each tank car. Federal regulations require that each rail tank car have a unique reporting mark and number, in the same way a license plate is unique to each passenger car on the road. No other tank car in North America or Mexico has this same series of letters and numbers. The rail car is required to be marked on both sides and both ends. Emergency responders can identify the contents of a tank car in an emergency situation from a safe distance by looking up the reporting mark and number using the Ask Rail app, viewing the train consist, or calling the controlling railroad emergency contact number. It is always advisable for emergency responders to use the description obtained from one of these methods as a comparison with the actual marking and placarding on the tank car. If there are differences, the rail carrier must be consulted immediately. Below the reporting mark and number is the tank car's load limit and light weight. The load limit, abbreviated as LD/LMT, is the maximum weight of lading that can be loaded into the tank car. The light weight, abbreviated as LT/WT, identifies the weight of the tank car when empty. So the sum of the light weight and the weight of the product cannot exceed the load limit. Load limit and light weight are stenciled in pounds and kilograms on every rail freight car. The U.S. Department of Transportation regulates the required marking for the side of a rail tank car. A critical piece of information an emergency responder will need to obtain is the rail tank car specification information. All DOT tank cars containing hazardous materials must be placarded on both sides and both ends. This DOT-117 is placarded with UN 1987 to indicate it is transporting alcohols, NOS, where NOS means not otherwise specified. You can match this UN number in the Emergency Response Guidebook, or ERG, to view emergency response protocols to employ for the identified hazardous material. The number located at the bottom point of the placard tells you the hazard class of the product. In this case, the tank car is transporting a Class 3 flammable liquid. Above the placard on the right side of the tank car is the DOT specification and qualification stencil. In this case, the DOT specification is DOT117J100W, which indicates the authorizing agency, tank car class, tank test pressure, material of construction, and other information regarding construction of the rail car. Below that DOT specification is the qualification stencil. This marking includes the last date of qualification and when the next qualification is due. More critically, this is where an emergency responder can find information on the pressure relief device, or PRD, and the pressure setting. This tank car's PRD is listed as a valve that is set to discharge at 75 psi. That means that if the pressure in the tank car exceeds 75 psi, the valve will open to relieve the excessive pressure. Once the pressure falls below 75 psi, the valve will reseat and seal off the car again. The ends of rail cars are designated as A and B. The B end is equipped with the handbrake, while the A end is the opposite end of the car. This image is the B end of this tank car. An easy way to remember which end is which, B equals brake. The presence of the handbrake indicates the B end of the car. Essential information such as capacity must be marked on both A and B ends. The capacity will be marked in gallons and liters because these rail cars can move into Canada and Mexico. As previously noted, both ends and both sides will display the reporting mark and number along with a placard holder. Also found on each end of the rail car is a double shelf coupler. This device provides the means for connecting one rail car to another. The coupler uses a pivoting knuckle and internal mechanism that automatically locks when the knuckle is pushed closed manually or by another coupler. The double shelf coupler has top and bottom shelves designed to prevent separation in a derailment or overspeed impact. This reduces the probability of adjacent tank car head punctures. DOT117 tank cars must have a system capable of sustaining coupler-to-head impacts of 18 miles per hour without the loss of lading. This is usually accomplished by the installation of separate head shields or full-head tank jackets made of half-inch thick steel on each end of the tank car. There are two types of braking mechanisms on the DOT117 tank car. The handbrake is a mechanical-style brake that is initiated through the wheel at the B end of the tank car. Air brakes are automatic systems that are more effective for braking, but they must be connected to an air supply, such as a locomotive. It's important to recognize that air brakes components and hoses could be under pressure. Many general service non-pressure tank cars have bottom outlet valves for loading or unloading. If a DOT117 is equipped with a bottom outlet valve, the handle must be removed prior to train movement or be designed with protection safety systems to prevent unintended actuation during accident scenarios. Notice that all bottom outlet valves must have a liquid-tight closure at the lower end. The outlet is also protected by a skid plate to help prevent damage to the valve in a derailment. Near the center of the car, above the bottom outlet valve handle, will be a stencil describing the proper operation of the handle for loading and unloading, as well as the securing procedure and proper venting techniques. The wheels and suspension system of a rail tank car are referred to as the truck bolster or trucks. The trucks align with the tank of the rail car at the truck center plate. The trucks and tank car are held together simply through gravity. A cup and saucer arrangement between the truck's bolster casting and one located on the rail car keep the parts aligned. A heavy steel centering pin is used to minimize the chance of separation that might occur due to track conditions. In the event of a derailment, the trucks may separate from the tank. DOT117 tank car specifications require the rail car to have a jacket with thermal protection. The jacket is a piece of 11-gauge steel that encases the thermal protection to the car. Thermal protection is a material or system applied to railcar tanks to limit the transfer of heat to the tank in the event of exposure to pool or torch fires. It is intended to reduce the likelihood of tank failure under such conditions. Thermal protection is not the same as insulation, which is intended to maintain or moderate lading temperature under ambient conditions. Thermal protection systems must have sufficient thermal resistance so there will be no release of any lading within a tank car, except through the pressure relief device, when subjected to a pool fire for 100 minutes and/or a torch fire for 30 minutes. It is important to recognize when a car is jacketed, as damage to the car may only be superficial damage to the jacket, or it may hide damage to the tank shell. A qualified tank car specialist can assist in determining the extent of damage to a car. On top of the tank car, you will find the protective housing and the hinged and bolted manway. Most non-pressure cars have a low-profile manway nozzle on top of the tank, equipped with a gasketed, hinged, and bolted manway cover. The cover is opened for loading and unloading or for access into the tank for maintenance. Loading and unloading fittings are typically located in the general area of the manway and are often enclosed with a hinged housing called a protective housing. Some non-pressure tank cars may be equipped with a protective housing similar to those used on pressure tank cars to provide additional protection for the valves and fittings from derailments, rollovers, or other accidents. Ethanol rail tank cars are equipped with a protective housing which protects the tank's valves. A DOT117 rail tank car is usually equipped with a 2-inch or 3-inch eduction line. This is the liquid line and has a pipe that goes to the bottom of the rail tank car. Product can be loaded and unloaded from this line. Under the protective housing, you will also find an air valve. This valve sits in the vapor space of the rail tank car. If an emergency responder is involved with an incident that has product coming out of the protective housing, this is a good indication that a plug is loose or a valve is open. Rail tank car pressure relief devices, PRDs, prevent internal pressure buildup above a specified setting. They open to release pressure and then close. Shown here is a standard typical valve-style PRD. The PRD is typically located in the protective housing on the DOT117 tank car. You can verify the PRD setting in the qualification stencil. Shown here is a type of vacuum relief valve, or VRV. The VRV is typically located adjacent to the top manway in the protective housing on a DOT117 tank car. Emergency responders should anticipate cable seals on the protective housing and manway. The manway is the large opening on the top of a DOT-117 tank car. There are either 6 or 8 swing bolts that swing into place to secure the manway in a closed position. The manway is hinged on one side to allow for full open access to the interior of the rail car. The 2 bolts by the manway handle are safety bolts. These are the last 2 bolts to be disengaged when opening the manway and the first 2 to be engaged when securing the manway. The purpose of the safety bolts is to allow for depressurization and prevent the manway from uncontrolled opening should the bolts come loose. The diameter of the manway is typically 18 to 24 inches. Under the manway lid is a gasket that seals the lid to the tank car nozzle. If the manway bolts are not secured properly per the manufacturer's recommendations, the bolts can come loose, which introduces the potential for an unintended release of product. This type of incidental release of product is referred to as a non-accidental release, or NAR. NARs can create an unsafe situation with risks to life, property, and the environment. More than 1.5 million rail tank car shipments in the U.S. each year contain a hazardous material. Ethanol accounts for roughly a quarter of those shipments. While over 99.99% of hazardous material shipments originate and arrive at their destination in a safe condition, incidents do happen. However, all the safety features of the DOT-117 tank car are intended to make it a safer vessel to transport flammable liquids. As a first responder, when you roll up on the scene of a hazardous materials emergency, remember, you are not alone and that you have a range of resources at your fingertips. There's a lot of information available to you from the carrier, in the Ask Rail app using the railcar reporting mark, and through contact with the shipper or Chemtrek. You do not need to rush in. Stand back, determine what you're dealing with, and proceed from there. AskRail is a safety tool that provides first responders immediate access to accurate, timely data to make an informed decision about how to respond to a rail emergency. Use the Railcar ID search to identify the hazardous material a car is carrying, view the contents of the entire train, and view emergency contact information for all Class 1 and short-line railroads plus Amtrak. AskRail is a good backup resource if information from the train conductor or train consist is not available. Stay informed and stay safe.